After 3 long weeks out on the road, it feels so good to be home. With that, ladies and gentlemen, good evening, WNBA and LA Sparks fans, and welcome in to the LA Sparks 365 Network, your 24/7, 365 comprehensive home for the WNBA and your two-time WNBA champion Los Angeles Sparks. Boy, it's been 3 weeks. My goodness, folks, we are so glad, or at least I'm so glad, to be back live on the air here and back in studio for the first time in well over 3 weeks. Back here on WNBA 365. Good evening, folks, or good early morning to you folks on the East Coast. And like normal, Cal McClurg is joining you here after 3 weeks off, back in Studio 171 in San Diego after what was 2 weeks over in the Big Apple of New York City and a couple days over in Phoenix, Arizona. With that, folks, we are really happy to be back. I know that it's been a while since we've been here. Obviously, we missed out on the last couple games of the Sparks regular season, the first couple playoff games. But glad to be back here this evening, and hopefully you folks are happy to have me back here after those 3 long weeks. Hopefully I've not missed a whole lot, and hopefully you folks have missed me a little bit. Hopefully, if you saw our question tonight, folks, on Twitter, let's get social already on Twitter at LA Sparks 365 or at CallumAc3 again. As you know, I was gone for 3 weeks, so if there was something that you missed about not seeing me on here, was it the T-shirts, the hair, the voice, whatever it may be? Let us know, please, on Twitter at LA Sparks 365 or at CallumAc3 with your response. We'll get to those responses hopefully during the duration of our show tonight. With that, folks, sadly, though, folks, on a very sour note this evening, the LA Sparks, after battling through a very rugged, turbulent, rocky season where you saw this team start 0-7 on the air, go 3-15 to begin the season, and then once Candace Parker comes back in the fray, they go 11-6 across that span to clinching their record-setting 15th WNBA playoff berth. But sadly, folks, the Sparks end the year on a sour note with a 91-80 loss in Game 3 of the 2015 WNBA Western Conference semifinals to the number 1 seed Minnesota Lynx in Minneapolis for the final score again of 91-80. Your final line score in the ballgame for the Sparks: 10 in the first quarter, 20 in the second, 27 in the third, and 23 in the fourth for the game total of 80. And for Minnesota, 18 in the first, 25 in the second, 20 in the third, and 28 more in the fourth for the game total of 91. Team comparison for the night, folks: field goal percentage, LA shot 46%, Minnesota 43% from the field. Beyond the arc, LA at 33% in the ballgame, Minnesota a whopping 14.3% in the ballgame from beyond the arc. Free throw percentage, LA at 86.5%, Minnesota 83.3%. On the assist front today, 18-15 Minnesota. Total rebounds in the ballgame. We'll get to the rebounding problems in a second for the tonight, but the Lynx out-rebound the Sparks tonight, 40-27, 16-7 offensively, and 24-20 defensively, 9-8 on steals for LA, 8-3 on blocks, favoring Minnesota. And turnover-wise, though, LA with 15 in the ballgame and 10 for Minnesota. The Lynx turned all 15 of those LA turnovers into 20 points. Off of turnovers, LA turned 11 of the Lynx's turnovers into points in the ballgame, 26-11 or 26-17 on the fouls for the ballgame in favor of Los Angeles. The final Sparks box score in the ballgame: Candace Parker, again, as we know, took the first half of the season off to get her body healthy and ready for what was a condensed season for her. 28 points in a full 40 minutes played for Ace in the ballgame. Nneka Ogwumike, 12 points. Jantel Lavender, 11. Alana Beard with 6. And Chrissy Tolliver also with 12. Anna Dobovich with 9. And Tamika Johnson with 2. The only players in the ballgame for Los Angeles that played in today's game. And for the Minnesota Lynx, Maya Moore, 20 points. Sylvia Fowles, 13. Simone Augusta, 16. Lindsay Whalen, 14. And Rebecca Brunson, all with 7. The only starter not in double figures for Minnesota this evening. And off the bench, Anna Cruz, 9. Devereaux Peters, 12. And Asia Jones, no points in the garbage time minutes for the Lynx. The Lynx with the win the series 2-1 over Los Angeles and advance to their 5th consecutive Western Conference Finals, where they'll meet the number 2 seed Phoenix Mercury. But folks, with the Sparks specifically here, now obviously sour way to end your season. Again, you see this team, as we said in the open, folks, in what is probably by far, in recent memory, one of LA's worst seasons in recent memory. maybe dating back to 2010 when Candace Parker ripped her meniscus in New York and the team went 10-24 that season. to favor their odds for the 2011 and 2012 drafts, respectfully. But I think that as you look at this year, folks, as we always know with the Sparks, every season, and there's so much anticipation. The fan base always saying, this is our year, this is our year. But this year, I think that we all can agree here, in spite of what you may be thinking out there right now, if you're watching me right now on Facebook, on Twitter, whatever it may be, that you knew that life without Candace Parker, the first go-round without seeing her in the lineup or on the floor, that it was going to be a bit of a struggle. And you saw this team struggle from game to game on the struggle bus, going 0-7, a franchise worst 0-7 to begin the season, 3-15 at the break, All-Star break this year. And you saw a lot of different phases of this team. You saw phases of this team get blown out on a night-to-night basis, play great for one half, and then squander the lead incrementally. You saw, your fair share of peaks and valleys, ups and downs, a roller coaster of emotion, folks, for this LA club this year. Of course, Brian Nagler being dealt a very rugged and very dreadful poker hand this year at the poker table, with all the other 12 teams at the poker table going for all the chips in the center pot. Injuries, rest, overseas play, not clicking on all cylinders. So obviously a very rough season for the Sparks. But I think, though, folks, as you saw this team get Candace Parker back after that dreadful, horrible, pathetic, whatever you want to say, just a very rough start for this team at 3-15 at the All-Star break, you see her come back in the fray, and then you see, it was like a whole nother team you saw almost. Not all the way, but you saw a difference in this team post the All-Star break when you had Candace Parker return to the lineup, and she made her presence known in basically, folks, in every game where she was, who knows how many times, one stat category away from her first career triple-double, folks. And to see her just ball out and play how she played this entire condensed season. Obviously, if there was an MVP for each half of the season, she'd probably get all your votes, perhaps, as she normally does for MVP. But, just to know and see her back at full strength, that time off, whether you agree with it or not, folks, the time off really helped rejuvenate her 30-year-old body, basically, going into next year when she does turn 30. She turned 29 this year, folks. But just seeing a resurgence in her play, in her demeanor, and how it wasn't like the Candace Parker of old, how she was more almost playing a role of her owner, Magic Johnson. You saw a lot of facilitation, assists, not scoring a lot of points because they had other pieces in place. And this was a case of Parker allowing others to join the fun and join the party. I mean, who cannot forget that amazing behind-the-head feed that she gave to a cutting Nneka Ogwumike in their comeback victory against the Mystics in early August. I mean, obviously, that was a play that I think got a lot of the LA fans jacked up. Obviously, had a chance at a dunk against the Lynx when they had the breast cancer game when they beat them by 22 points at Staples Center. But he just saw a resurgence, and you saw a rejuvenated Candace Parker that I believe is going to be ready for 2016 and past 2016 for LA. Also this year, folks, the two most consistent players in this LA lineup in spite of injuries, Nneka Ogwumike, Jantel Lavender. Hats off to those two players for what was their first true chance to shine and not be in the background of the spotlight. Of course, with Ace being in the spotlight, but this was their chance to really show their stuff. This was their showcase for the first half of the year, folks. And in spite of how bad that record was, folks, Jantel Lavender and Nneka Ogwumike, two emerging stars in the WNBA, played their tails off to try to keep the Sparks sinking ship afloat while Ace was recuperating and recovering and resting during the first half of the season. Erin Phillips, in spite of her getting injured late in the season, proved to be what she was going to be when she came to LA, what she was with Indiana in 2012 and the Mercury last year, a potent three-point shooter that was going to be the starting guard the entire season, and sadly got banged up with a sprained knee, and then, of course, had a bit of a other problem with her knee as well. Then you saw Mariana Tolo play until she was also banged up with her torn ACL in Indianapolis a few weeks ago. But you saw a young rookie who also plays with Erin Phillips with the Australian Opals, the national team. So obviously their connection, that's a dynamic duo going forward. And then, of course, you bring in a few age vets, Tamika Johnson, Michelle Snow late in the season brought in. Obviously, Meek, not the best of seasons, did her best, though, to facilitate and score some points when they needed her to score points in a couple of big situations, and, of course, beat the buzzer a few times early in the season. Then you saw Ana Dobovic, a player that we really had no knowledge about other than the fact that she was the MVP of the Eurobasket tournament for Serbia early in the WNBA season, that she comes to LA and brings her MVP status to the Sparks this year, being that spark plug off the bench. I mean, some of the play, some of her play was absolutely fantastic this season, including game 2, a career high in points, a couple of big shots to keep the Sparks lead afloat and sustain that lead when the Lynx had made a big run in the second half coming out of the halftime break. So Dobovic, also a good season. And then, of course, Christy Tolliver, also like Ace, missing time because of overseas obligations, came back, may have missed a few beats, but hey, the all-time franchise leader in scoring, 43-point game on the 4th of July against the Shock at Staples Center. So in spite, folks, hear me out here. In spite of the negativity, the rough start, how it was this year, folks, there are still a whole lot of positives for you as a fan to hang your hat on and say, okay, it was a crappy season maybe, but hey, you always try to find the positives in a season that may have gone down the drain when it started 0-7 this year, folks. And frankly, there is a big reason for you as a LA fan to be proud of his team, because frankly, it was almost going from rags to riches this season. How you had just, a very, very horrible, pathetic start to the season. A franchise worst start of 0-7. And you see, okay, we're exposed without Ace. We need to get her back healthy when she does come back. And in spite of the rumors about her wanting to leave Los Angeles, maybe the rumors of her being out for the whole season, she came back and did not miss a drum beat at all when she did come back. Back in late July, early August, she came back and made her presence immediately known to the league that, LA would not be a walkover for the rest of the season. And to see this team, in spite of all the injuries, in spite of the rest, and you, the fans, voicing your opinions in a good way or bad way about the team this year, you have to be pretty damn proud of how this team was able to hold the fort together, keep the ship afloat when it was being beat up by cannonballs, by icebergs, and everything else included. You have to be pretty damn proud, folks, of how this LA club kept their heads above water and made it to the finish line and got into the playoff picture with a late season surge. I know it probably doesn't cut it for a lot of you fans, but in my case, seeing this team struggle so early and for them to rally back, and have a never say die attitude, even when they were 0-7 or 3-15 at the All-Star break, to see them rally around each other and you, the fans, in a good way or bad way, give them crap for taking time off to rest, whatever it may have been, folks, to see how this team performed late in the season to get into the playoff, to even get in the playoff race, and above all, get in the playoffs, in the back doors, the 4 seed. You got to just applaud them and say, hey, you guys did all you could to make us as fans proud. Whether I loved it or not, you guys did a great job for what you guys did this year. One quick tweet from Crystal Thomas at Pup1010. She says, real quickly, I am proud of how this team fought the whole season. And I think that you fans, that we all should be proud of them. I know that a lot of the fans out there, not being a sore loser or being, defensive for a player, but again, about how most of you fans, calling you out, yes, but in a nice way, of how most of the fan base was calling out Candace Parker for taking the time off to rest her body from 8 consecutive years of overseas play. You should be proud, in spite of what you may think about this LA club going forward, whether it's roster, procurement, the GM, the head coach, whatever it may be, folks. Toss that aside for me, please. For one quick second, throw your thoughts about the team out the window, please, and just, be thankful for what this team gave you this season. Crystal goes on to say, makes me proud to be a Sparks fan. Going to be a long, hard off season, but I am proud to close tweet. Yes. Now it's going to be a bit rough. Yes. Just for the fact again, once again, that the Sparks again take the off ramp from the playoff party a bit prematurely, of course, here in the conference semifinals. But again, though, folks, just as I've said before, folks, to see how this team completely rallied around each other, and of course, the fan support always helps. I mean, in spite of how that start was, folks, 0-7, 3-15. I was at the last 2 games before the All-Star break just to see how the fan base still came out and still supported this team through thick and thin, through thick and thin, through the ups and the downs, the roller coaster of emotion that was the season. Hey, I salute you fans, both good way and bad way, for how you supported the team. for the entire season. Now, with that, folks, there was one other game 3 to decide who would go on to face the Indiana Fever, who took down the number 2 seed Chicago Sky in the 2015 Eastern Conference Finals, folks. And the New York Liberty rallied back after being down early, going ahead, then coming back to win the game, 79-74 to advance to the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time in 5 years since 2010. The line score for Washington in the ball game, 25 in the first, 12 in the second, 20 in the third, and 17 in the fourth for the game total, of 74. And for the Liberty, 15 in the first and a 30-point second quarter for the Liberty, 12 in the third and 22 in the fourth for the game total of 79 to advance to the Eastern Conference Finals. For Washington in the ball game, Ivory Lotta with 18 points, Tia Ruffin-Pratt 17, Kia Vaughn with 10, Emma Meesman with 8, Stephanie Dolson 6, and off the bench, Kia Vaughn with 10, Taylor Hill with 4, Natasha Cloud no points, Kara Lawson with 5, and Amy Mallett no points in 20 seconds played for her. And for the New York Liberty, who advanced to the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time in 5 years since 2010, Tina Charles puts in 22 points for the Liberty this evening. Also, starting-wise, Swin Cash on her birthday, no points, standing for Swin. Avery Worley Talbot at center, 1 point. Epiphany Prince, 7 points. And Tanisha Wright with 9. And then off the bench for New York, boy, oh boy, that bench was ice cold and had some sugar on it this evening. But first and foremost, Kia Stokes with 8, Essence Carson, no points. And then Sugar Rogers pours in 20, and ice, too cold. Candace Wiggins with 12 points, made all 4 of her 3-pointers in the ball game, and a couple in a big-time situation. Obviously, folks, as you probably see in the bottom left of your screen, of course, I'm representing both of my favorite players, both on the Wall of Fame and also personally between Ace and Candace Wiggins, folks. And frankly, the Game 3 for the East really had me a wee bit, this is not good, because the Mystics, I think, folks, they kind of outworked themselves in the first quarter. They went up by 10 early in the first half, and it looked like their balloon popped once the Liberty had put the 30 spot on them in quarter 2, because I think that they exerted so much energy in in the first 10 minutes that it was like their gas gauge kind of went from all the way up here, like down. It's like the oil crisis hit again. And I think, though, that you saw New York without Carolyn Swords at center because she got hurt in game 2 in DC, that you saw an entire Liberty team effort in this ball game between the starters trying to pick up the scraps for Swords. You saw Tina Charles have a great game with 22 points, but of course, folks, off the bench, though, more importantly, Rogers and Wiggins, folks. I mean, I was at the point where I was yelling at the TV and telling Bill Lambier through the TV, you got to keep Rogers and Wiggins in the ball game, because whenever they touched the ball was going in the net. I mean, between Wiggins making the 4 threes, 2 of them late in the game, including one in the fourth quarter that really gave them an extra cushion before Epiphany Prince nailed the dagger to win the game late when the shot clock was running down, folks. Sugar Rogers and Candace Wiggins, folks, I believe, won this game for New York and really carried them to the finish line to win Game 3 tonight in New York. I think that when you saw, once you saw Wiggs make one, maybe even the second 3, you knew she was getting hot, and you just kept feeding her the ball, folks. That's what New York did, because when you see these 2 players, folks, getting hot, and they're off the bench, I mean, to see the Liberty bench outwork the Mystic starters was another reason why New York won this game as well, because you saw production from both sides of the floor, between Wiggins having a crucial steal in the first half with a great dish off to Rogers. That's why Wiggins is public enemy number 1 on defense. So you saw the Liberty play a full, complete game tonight, and they do move on to the conference finals for the first time in 5 years. And for Washington, folks, I mean, I really, I know that my girl Candace Wiggins can solve the Rubik's Cube in 3 minutes or less. Frankly, I don't even know if I could solve the Mystics' problems in 3 minutes or less, because Washington, they seem to be a little bit like Los Angeles, where they just seem to have some sort of curse or bad luck in the postseason in the first round. I mean, the Mystics, I believe, what I recall hearing, maybe wrong here, if someone can clear this up for me, that the Mystics have not won a playoff series since 2002. I mean, so obviously there is something there with Washington specifically, and maybe even LA in the postseason, where they just can't seem to be able to solve the equation in the postseason. Now, frankly, Mike Tebow, folks, has done a hell of a job with this Mystics team. Again, he's taken a team the past few years without a lot of star power. No big names, a few up-and-coming rookies in Hartley and Dolson. Emma Meesman's growing into a player, growing into one as well. And Ivory Lotters, who's been a journeywoman her career in the WNBA. For him to take a team with not a lot of star power, just kind of, to see him do this, is why, a reason why I think is a reason why I like Mike as a coach. One more tweet from Crystal Thomas. She says Washington is kind of like LA. Something is missing, and I agree because I believe that it just kind of seems that way with both the Mystics and the Sparks. There is some kind of there is something that just seems to do this for both the Sparks and the Mystics in the postseason. Now, I don't know if it's because it's a whole nother season or whatever the case may be, folks, but Mike Thibault does not get a lot of credit for coaching Washington because there's no star players on the team. There's a few of them, but no big names, really. No big names. And he's done a remarkable job, folks, and I really do applaud. My hat goes off to Mike Thibault, who has done nothing but continue to get in the postseason with Washington. Now it's just a matter of time, the folks of both the Sparks and the Mystics, both of them taking that next step to getting through round one, into round two, and then eventually, sometime soon for both of them, hopefully, into round three, which is the WNBA Finals. So obviously, of course, the Mystics and Sparks both ousted tonight with their Game 3 losses. Again, the Lynx win Game 3 in the West, 91-80. And the Liberty, for the first time in 5 years, win the Eastern Conference semis over Washington, 74-79. Now, folks, a bigger story, though, a really big story coming out of the Eastern Conference, folks, is the fact about the schedule. Now, folks, the schedule for the Eastern Conference Finals begins tomorrow night. Now, I'm sure you're saying to yourself, why and how this is possible, folks. Ladies and gentlemen, Kevin Messenger, who covers the Indiana Fever, had a graphic posted on his Twitter account that was retweeted by the Fever that had 4 different travel day scenarios for the Indiana Fever, barring the outcome of Game 2 on Sunday. The scenarios, if I recall best, that if it went to Game 3, that the Fever would travel to New York to get ready for that game. One more tweet again here, folks, from Crystal Thomas. She says half of it is bench play. Sparks Mystics need to utilize the bench more. Frankly, I think that here Brian Agler and the Sparks sign Michelle Snow for the playoffs, but she plays absolute 0 minutes. So obviously not pushing the right buttons in the right moment hurt both LA and Washington in the playoffs this season. But folks, getting back to my bigger point, though, folks, there was like 4 to 6 different there was like 4 different scenarios that Kevin Messenger, one of our great insiders for the WNBA from the Fever specifically, had put out about if this happens on Sunday, if this happens on Tuesday, so on and so forth. So, folks, here's the whole story here. The Liberty, you get to win. You won Game 3, but guess what? You get to play Game 1 tomorrow night in your building. It's against a team that went to 3 games as well, but has a day of rest on you because they didn't have to travel anywhere. Stephanie White, Gary Kloppenberg, and Gail Gostencourt, folks, the Fever were at tonight's game. The team was at the Garden watching Game 3 in the event that something had gone on with the game tonight in New York. Now, folks, for one deal, I know that in baseball I've seen it where, depending on overall record, where baseball games have gone to a extra game playoff where the team that wins literally has to leave right after their game to play Game 1 of the next round the very next night in a whole other city. Now, folks, what I have gathered and what I know of right now is there is a booking problem with the Garden over the weekend, which is why the Liberty have been forced to play Game 1 of the conference finals tomorrow at Madison Square Garden. There's been stuff going on about that. in regards to booking. Now, again, we saw this with the Sparks on Sunday. The game played at the Walter Pyramid on the campus of CSU Long Beach because the Emmy Awards were at Staples Center and in the LA Live area. Folks, this one right here, is going to be the bigger one because if the Liberty come out flat tomorrow night, I guess we can kind of blame the schedulers for scheduling game one of the finals right after game three of the conference semifinals. Could you at least give whoever won the game a small chance to catch their breath? So I think that kind of having this, folks, kind of gives Indiana a very microscopic edge in the category of rest and fatigue because the Liberty had to gut out a 40-minute effort, pull the game out late, and now have to recoup for a few hours and then wake up and play a whole nother game again tomorrow. Again, I'm not trying to sound soft or whatever, folks, but I just think that the timing of playing the next round immediately after a game three in the conference semis and starting the conference finals so quick just doesn't seem to do it for me at all at this point. We have a couple of quick comments here from Todd Mintz, who's been watching us here on the broadcast today. He says in regards to the Eastern Conference Finals, he says another thing is even though Indiana got by Chicago, the slow starts every year affect the season. You have to finish realistically with top two in the division to have home court in first round. He also says that New York will need to have Swin Cash make an impact in the series and defend Tamika Catchings. And also does say about Mike Tebow and the Mystics, Mike Tebow is the equivalent of Jerry Salone of the WNBA. He also says that Emma Mieseman and Dolson did not have a great series, or they may have won the series. Their issue is guards. He needs help for a lot if they become serious. Yeah, you know what, Todd and folks, I agree. You know, Swin Cash was sadly MIA tonight, of course, with her celebrating her 39th birthday this evening, or 36, one of those two. I apologize to Swin if I messed up on the age factor. But to not see her score any points tonight was a pretty big burden for New York because you kind of saw that the rest of the play kind of went on Wright, on Prince, on Charles, again, who had a hefty amount of points and had 22 tonight. And in regards to, and I agree though, folks, and sadly, you know, Mike Tebow is sadly the Jerry Sloan of the WNBA, where he has, you know, great teams that do well in the regular season, but again, they just can't seem to get the job done in the postseason when it counts the most. But again, folks, a quick question to throw to you folks here: do you believe do you believe though that it's right to schedule game one of the conference finals then 24 hours after the completion of a 3-game series? You know, should the WNBA have rethought themselves when they first thought about, you know, should the league have done something to accommodate both New York and or Washington because of the game three, because of it going to game three on Tuesday and having game one of the conference finals the very next day. So again, folks, the last question before we got here for the night again is: should the WNBA have reconsidered the schedule for game one of the East Conference Finals because of game three going to game three? So on Twitter with your responses. But again, folks, to reiterate again our final scores from the night in the WNBA playoff picture: Western Conference Game 3 final, Minnesota over Los Angeles 91-80, and New York out east over Washington 79-74. Game, again, folks, and tomorrow, the only game tomorrow, again, game one of the WNBA Eastern Conference Finals will feature the number 3 seed Indiana Fever taking on the number 1 seed New York Liberty at 4:00 p.m. on ESPN2 from the Madison Square Garden in New York. And, of course, game one of the Western Conference Finals will tip off on Friday night, or Thursday night, I should say, in Minnesota at that game will be at the Target Center in Minneapolis, Minnesota, between the Mercury and Lynx. That game will also be by the way, folks, all the games can be seen on ESPN2 for the duration of the postseason when it does come to an end in a couple of weeks. But again, folks, Indiana and New York tomorrow at 4:00 on ESPN2, Phoenix and Minnesota on Thursday on ESPN2. With that, folks, we are so glad to be back with you folks here after 3 long weeks off for vacation. We will see you folks back here to recap game one of the conference finals between New York and Indiana right back here tomorrow night. But until tomorrow night, folks, have a safe night. Drive home safely. Thank you for tuning in and joining us. And good night now. This has been the LA Sparks 365 Network. We are Sparks. We are LA. We have a WNBA. We'll see you folks back here tomorrow night for more playoff coverage back here on LAS 65. Campbell and San Diego signing off. Have a great night, folks. We'll see you back here tomorrow night to recap Game 1 of the East Conference Finals between New York and Indiana. So long, folks. See you tomorrow. Have a great night. Love you all. Talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.